This is the 20th season of Bass Talk Live. BTL is presented by Bass Cat Boats, Strike King Lures, AFTCO, Pro Guide Batteries, Spro, Gamakatsu, The Bass Tank, Denali Rods, Beatdown Outdoors, and Sunline.
BTL coming at you.
Good morning, and welcome to another exciting edition of BTL Bass Talk Live, where we are going to talk about fishing March 12th, which means we're like just a couple days over a week away from the Bassmaster Classic on Grand Lake of the Cherokees. Have I been in Oklahoma long enough, Gene, to call you a fellow Oklahoman, or am I still a transplant? We're talking 2005 here.
Oh, yeah, that's plenty long enough.
Plenty long enough. All right, fellow Oklahoman, Bass Fishing Hall of Fame inductee 2021 or 22?
2.
2022 Bass Fishing Hall of Fame inductee Gene Gilliland and current conservation director for B.A.S.S. And also something that I just learned, you came early because you have your stuff together and you like to get early and get things settled, unlike me. But you are also on the tech committee for Bassmaster.
Correct.
So we're going to dive into that a little bit and then talk about all sorts of fun things that are probably the most important aspect of the sport that no one likes to talk about because it's not sexy. Is that a fair assessment?
Oh, more than fair, yeah.
You're the one who told me that one time. You said the hardest thing is to get people involved in conservation and that type, because unless it directly impacts you and the fishery that you fish, it's very hard to get people to be passionate about it because it's an out of sight, out of mind thing.
That's very true. It's fishermen tend to be reactive rather than proactive. And until something bad happens, it's hard to get fishermen to get involved. And so a lot of times conservation issues just don't see the light of day.
Scott Martin, I was talking with at the Open, and he's done posts about what's going on down in Florida with the Lake Okeechobee and the two groups as far as do you send water out into the Gulf, which causes that, and then they're claiming it's sugar. Anyway, so Scott posts this stuff very passionately off air, behind the scenes. He is twice as passionate about it. Like I just mentioned it to him, and he went into it, what really grinds my gears speech for a solid half hour after one of the days of practice. Right. And especially when it comes to conservation, I didn't realize how much, I guess I did, but he was explaining it, how much politics plays behind the scenes, especially with water. And when you think about it, I mean, this goes back to kind of the beginning of time when people started settling, because water is like, and who has the water is, I mean, that's like wars and battles have been fought over water rights.
Sure. Water is a lot of the issues that we have in fishing relate to who owns the water, who's got the control of the water. And unfortunately, a lot of times fishing interests aren't at the top priority level. And that's, those of us that are passionate about bass fishing have a very narrow focus a lot of times when there's so many other pieces of that puzzle, so many other people, organizations, governments involved in water rights and who uses it and where it goes and that sort of thing. It's not a simple fix. And that's part of the problem, is that we want instant gratification. We want something fixed today. We want it done the way it benefits us. But unfortunately, there's a lot of other players, and politics and money play a big, big role in it, unfortunately.
You mentioned fishing in the priority level. Are you 35 years into this now?
Oh, more like 40.
40?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, list the priority level from one to fishing as a whole. I know it's a little bit different just based on specific situations, but you've dealt with stuff not only in Oklahoma with the DNR here, but also on a national level. You've been to Washington, you've done all that, you've dealt with a lot of it. Like, where just kind of rank the priority level. I'm curious.
Well, water rights, if you want to call it, if we want to, kind of go down a list. Obviously, water supply for human consumption and human needs is typically the most important thing. A lot of the water supplies then around the country also serve other purposes like flood control. Some of them are for navigation. And there's irrigation and agricultural uses. Recreation, which would include fishing, typically are below those other ones. There's next to very few places around the country where recreation is, say, in the top 3 uses for a body of water. It's unfortunately, from the fishing standpoint, some of the things that have to be done for those higher priorities are counterproductive to the things we would like to see for the fishing. If navigation or water supply changes water levels, fluctuation stuff, sometimes those things that are mandated to be done for those higher priorities can be detrimental to the quality of the fishing. And from the fishing interest standpoint, from our standpoint, whether it's Bassmaster or whether it's a state fish and wildlife agency, sometimes they just don't have the control. And I used to always say, as a biologist, we've got to play the cards we're dealt. And sometimes we just don't have a very good hand.
So you just make the best. I'm trying to think. So, like, would a place like where fishing would be important, I would think would have to have a high population of people that the only reason they're there is for recreational fishing that expands beyond the fishery for a lot of livelihoods, a high population of guiding to where people are only in that region for fishing, and there's people whose livelihoods depend on it. Would Mille Lacs or something be like a fishery where there's a lot of emphasis? I know that there's a lot of noise around Mille Lacs between the smallmouth and the walleye, and we've talked about you've mentioned there's like the Smallmouth Alliance up there and all sort. Would that be an example of a fishery that is driven and decisions are made around the fishing and not the other factors that are typically more important on other bodies of water?
Yes. That would be a good example, because they don't draw out of it for irrigation. It's not flood control. It might be water supply for a very small, some of the little communities around there. But there's another big player in especially some of the northern lakes and in the Pacific Northwest, places like that, where tribal interests, the Indian tribes, have a huge role in what happens in how that lake is managed. So it's not just the recreational anglers that have the voice. The management of the fishery has got to take in not just the walleye fishermen and the bass fishermen, but they have the tribal interests that have, by treaty rights, to be able to take fish out of those lakes. So that's another one of those juggling acts that the DNR in Minnesota in particular has to deal with.
Or like in the case of Leech Lake, harvest rice.
Correct.
Which, for those of you, if you're listening to BTL, you follow the open EQs. Let's just face it. It's I don't think there's very many people who listen to BTL and that don't follow the tournament trails. But wild rice, I had never heard of it until Leech Lake was on the schedule. And when do we go there? We go there. I've got my schedule up there. We go to Leech in August.
Yeah.
We'll be there for my birthday. The middle of August, everyone in the country is going to learn a lot about wild rice. Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah. It's it's one of those little subtle little things that there's certain places where certain aspects really play a role. I'll give you another example. Lake Fork, where we just had the elite tournament. Lake Fork was built as a water supply for the Dallas metro area.
Oh, I did not realize that.
Lake Fork was not built for fishing.
Are you serious?
Lake Fork was built as the Sabine River Authority for flood control and water supply. Now, as it turns out, the city of Dallas or the Dallas metro area has not had to use much of that water for a long, long time. So the lake stayed relatively stable, grew a lot of vegetation, grew a lot of big bass, developed this huge economy around it based on bass fishing and crappie fishing. And it hasn't been until just the last, probably less than 10 years, where there's been much in the way of water withdrawals that would affect the fluctuation of the lake and that sort of thing. So even though the lake wasn't built for fishing, the Texas Parks and Wildlife did an economic study down there several years ago, and it was worth like $30 million a year to the local economy. And I'm sure it's even more than that now just because of inflation and everything. But when you start talking about some of these other lakes where you think about fishing, Lake Texoma, here one in our backyard, economic study showed that the economic impact from the striper fishing on Lake Texoma was worth like $25 million a year, because lots and lots of guides, thousands of people a year come there fishing. But when you compare that to the value of the water being sold out of that lake to the North Texas Municipal Water District, the fishing doesn't even come close to what the water is worth.
So Lake Texoma is the main water source for the majority of North Texas.
Part of there's an organization, a group of municipalities in kind of the northern suburbs of the Dallas metro area.
Okay. That
get a lot of their water. They've got a number of reservoirs around, and Texoma is just there's a pipeline. But what I'm getting at is that the value of that water is worth way more. You look at some of the lakes in Arizona. They pump that water to Southern California,
like Pleasant, Roosevelt,
and
Meade.
Yeah, and that. Well, Lake Mead waters for Las Vegas.
Yeah.
The value of the fishery in those lakes is far less than what the water's worth for, human consumption.
Mm-hmm.
And so the priority levels for managing that lake for fishing are way down the list.
Which is understandable.
Yeah. So unfortunately, the anglers always say, well, gosh, the Corps of Engineers always drops the water level right during the spawn, or they raise the water level. They come up with, there's always somebody that's doing something wrong when it comes to the fish management. But you take what the Corps of Engineers or TVA, for example, what they do with those water levels is mandated by Congress. And fishing and recreation are far enough down on the priority list that, the Corps says, okay, the law says we have to have a water level here at this time of year and here at this time of year. And if that impacts the fishery, well, that's the way it is.
All right. That brings up, this is a dumb question, and there's probably people are going to roll their eyes on this, but like Tennessee fisheries do it a lot. Like the TVA fisheries, you mentioned it. So like a Douglas, where you go there in the winter and all the docks are dry.
40-foot drawdown.
What is the purpose of like a drawdown?
Okay.
And why do they bring it back up? Like I get it. Like I understand what it does, but I don't understand why they do it.
Well, the TVA system originally was built for hydropower and for navigation. And so that's the top priority is trying to maintain the right amount of water in the main stem reservoirs for hydropower and for
Which
navigation.
what are the main stem reservoirs?
Well,
on the TVA?
that would be Kentucky Lake, Pickwick, Gunnersville, all the way up to Knoxville.
So all the other smaller lakes that
the little lakes on the outside, the Douglas and the Cherokees and all of those lakes were built basically to regulate how much water is going into the big river. So in the wintertime, they draw them way down so that when the spring rains hit, they have the capacity to hold that water back. So you don't flood the big river. And that helps maintain the proper amount of flow in the main river for navigation for hydropower. So once the big rains that, typically we get our big rains in the spring and early summer.
Yeah.
Once those have gone through, they can raise those water levels back up. And a lot of those smaller lakes actually have hydropower facilities on them too. But those big drawdowns are basically a safety net to hold back water. Same thing here in Oklahoma, the Arkansas Navigation System.
Mm-hmm.
A lot
Fort
of the
Gibson.
lakes. That's why Fort Gibson fluctuates so drastically.
You could go up 3 foot in a day.
Right. Oh, yeah. 20 feet overnight. I fished a tournament over there one year where it came up overnight, 20 feet.
Okay, so it's the same thing with the GRDA.
The Arkansas River Navigation System for the barge traffic, they want to maintain a pretty level flow. So they use these tributary reservoirs to help regulate that.
So in order to have barge traffic to get millions of dollars of goods, coal, whatever they're getting down there, they're saying, hey, we're willing to flood Fort Gibson or with the other levels because it's more valuable for us to have commerce going up and down this river. And if all of this was to dump into the river, there'd be no way that we could.
Yeah, they couldn't regulate it. Yeah, you'd wind up with flood.
And that's just a dollar and cents thing.
That's what it amounts to.
So what about, I remember a couple years ago, there were a bunch of pissed off people in Grove when Grand flooded. And then they were like, why don't you guys drop the water level? And they didn't drop the water level and it got up into the houses. Was that kind of the same deal where they were having to make decisions based? Where did they want that water to go? Well,
from Grand, it goes down into Hudson and then Fort Gibson and eventually into the Arkansas River.
So it's the same thing. It was just a chain of events because if you put it into that, then it would flood that and then that and then that.
When you think about something like the TVA system or the Grand River system here in Oklahoma or the Columbia River out in the Northwest, it's a network of a bunch of lakes connected. And then there's these tributary lakes off to the sides. And the Corps of Engineers or whoever the managers are can't manage one lake at a time. They've got to look at the whole network.
It's a chain reaction.
So when you get tremendous amounts of rain over an entire watershed, they've got to regulate the whole system. And if the river's flooding, there's nowhere to dump the water.
Yeah.
And so Fort Gibson fills up. There's only so much it can hold. Now we got to back up. Hudson can only hold so much. Now we've got to hold more in Grand Lake. And so the water levels come up. And a lot of that's just because of the nature of the beast, so to speak, that they've got to manage it as a whole system, not just one lake at a time.
I feel like that was a fair question after that explanation. So what about, you hear a lot also out on the Cal Delta, a lot of stuff going on. So are the deltas regulated like that too, or what are the how does that work? Because I don't even know what's going. I'm not as familiar with it out there, but I know there's all sorts of issues going on the Delta.
Well,
is that fair? Am I right on that?
No, it's there's a lot of the water in the Cal Delta is promised to agriculture.
Okay, because it's valuable. Because billions of dollars.
The Central Valley in California produces most of the food we eat in this country, or a lot of it anyway. And so that, and the fact that the population in especially in Southern California is, continually growing. So there's this huge demand for water. And so again, it's part of that whole network. You've got these reservoirs up in the mountains. that have to hold water at certain times, release water at certain times, filling water up into the delta, and then water from the delta is pumped and piped, into the agricultural fields all across California. And that's huge amounts of money that are controlling the politics there. And from a fishery standpoint, that makes it much
way down on the
list. Down on the list. And the fish managers in California, they, again, that water's not just there for fishing, so they have to play with the cards they're dealt, and in some cases, it's not a very good deal for them.
You're talking about money. I would assume that's the main reason why. Name a predominantly healthy grass lake that has a lot of really nice houses on it. Like $1 million houses. Isn't that the reason? Because of the money? And if you haven't, you don't want the grass and you want to ski and be able to get into your dock and not have the hydrilla beds and things, like they have a big influence on what gets sprayed, what gets killed. No, am I wrong on that? Because I think just as an angler, we assume it's like a couple rich guys going, I want my kids to be able to jump off the dock and not be covered in salad.
Sometimes, you think about there's some pretty big houses on Guntersville, and TVA doesn't do a lot of spraying on Guntersville.
It's been an issue on Guntersville in the past. I know
it has been, and they've created some groups that try to help manage that more effectively.
See everyone on here saying, yeah, big money houses kill all the grass. Bingo, Matt.
Yeah.
But so that's
it. But you got to remember that from the agencies, whoever's managing that water, there's a lot of stakeholders there. I'll give you a perfect example. Lake Apopka.
Yep.
In Florida. About, sometime this last several months ago, it is managed by the St. John's Water Management District. And they supply water to lots and lots of people. They had a public meeting to talk about hydrilla control on Lake Apopka. Now,
why?
Let me finish. Lake Apopka was at one time one of the most polluted lakes in the entire country. They got a lot of things cleaned up. Hydrilla started coming in. The fishery has been really good the past several years. In fact, a lot of the tournaments, that's where on the Harris chain, people are running to Apopka because that's where a lot of good fishing is. The weed control people in Florida don't like hydrilla because it tends to get out of control fairly easily. If you leave too much, the next thing you know, you've got way too much, and then it hinders all sorts of things. So they decided they were going to have some public meetings to talk about the management process. 3 fishermen showed up. That's it. Nobody showed up to voice their concerns. And when you've got homeowners, and this goes back to what some of your viewers are saying, when you've got homeowners that live on lakes.
Gene, there's 3 docks on Lake Apopka.
Yeah, but there's a lot of other people that use the lake. We're not the only people that use the lake. But what I'm saying is the fishermen didn't show up to voice their concerns. When you've got lakes that have homeowners associations that are very vocal and very powerful, it's not necessarily that they got the most money. It's because they show up at meetings and they make their wishes. And the fishermen typically sit on the sidelines and wonder why the bus just ran them over. And that's one of the problems we've got in so many places around the country where, yes, the fishing may not be a top priority, but even though we're a lower priority, we just don't get people mobilized a lot of times to be able to fight the fight. Or in the case of some of these lakes, what we've always tried to do is say, let's at least get a seat at the table when these decisions are being made. And if you don't have a seat at the table, you're going to get run over.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just the nature of the way politics works these days. And so in some cases, it's not just because some rich guy wants to get rid of the weeds. In some places, herbicide treatments are mandated by the state legislature. There's states where they have said, I'll take North Carolina as an example.
Okay.
Most of the reservoirs in North Carolina are owned by power companies like Duke Energy.
I did not know that.
Duke Energy doesn't want floating mats of hydrilla floating into their intakes and clogging up the pumps on nuclear power plants.
And they've got like trillions of dollars with a T.
Yeah. So hydrilla is kind of like public enemy number one to them.
Yeah.
And so when the stuff starts to grow, they want to get rid of it because that directly influences not only the water quality, but the fact that they have issues with it in terms of power generation and that sort of thing. Okay, so it's not because some rich guy doesn't want hydrilla out in front of his dock. It's because the power company doesn't want it screwing up the power plant.
Wait, did you say that the power company owns the lake?
Yes.
How does that work?
They built the lakes. It's just like
So-
GRDA built Grand Lake. Okay.
So even though it's a public, is it a public fishery still though? How does that?
Yes.
This is I've never heard.
They
of
own.
this.
They own. It's like Kanawha Lake here in Oklahoma.
Okay.
Oklahoma Gas and Electric,
Yeah.
OG&E, owns Kanawha Lake. It's public fishing water. They don't own the water. They own the bucket.
Did they build the lake?
Yes.
So a power company came in. There was a parcel of
Yes.
land.
Yes.
They went to the state and they said, "Hey, we want to build a lake here. We want to bring this many jobs. This is what we want to do. This is what we want
We're going to
to
generate electricity.
We're going to generate electricity. It's going to be this many billions of dollars." And the state goes, "Awesome." And then
And
a bunch of engineers go out and say,
And they build the lake, and then the state Fish and Wildlife Agency is tasked then with trying to regulate or manage.
so
the
why don't
fishery.
they just build it in a circle? Like, why is it all weirdly shaped and stuff? Why don't they just,
They build a dam across the river, and you get whatever.
so
you-
every
you
little,
get.
okay.
Yeah.
You would think, okay.
Lake of the Ozarks.
Oh, so they're looking for an area that already has water coming in with the
Sure.
river coming in
Sure.
that they can just dam up and then
Right.
it fills up and
Right.
then whatever happens. And then after all that, then the fisheries comes
And-
in and say, all right, we got
and-
this body of water. How
Right.
can we turn this into a fishery? What do we want to stock in here? How can we make a little bit of money on the side with it?
The fishing,
That was dumb. I
the
like that.
recreational aspects are secondary, or even more than less than
Yeah,
secondary.
no, I'm getting roasted.
So, Lake of the Ozarks was built as a power generation.
yeah.
So there's lakes like that all over the country that were built by power companies. Excuse me. A lot of places were built by, say, the Corps of Engineers or TVA, but there's quite a number of them around.
So that's
The Coosa River chain in Alabama.
So that's why there's a lot of underwater, like there's an underwater town on Grand, and there was a bunch of things when Lake Fork in 1980 that got moved.
Used to be a farmland.
Used to be farmland, but
Mhm.
because it was ideal for what they wanted to do, is that like eminent domain or whatever, where they're like, hey, like
Yeah.
you gotta move
Yeah.
because this is where we're damming this thing up.
They pay off the landowners and move them out. But it's
And I do know about Clinton. Like, I mean, I understand what a power plant lake is, but I didn't. I just don't understand like how that works.
There's a
surrounding
lot
it.
of the larger lakes around were built by the reservoirs anyway.
Mhm.
Were built by were power companies.
Are there new? Is there a new one in Texas that I just heard about being
There's-
built? It was like one of the first new lakes in
There's
the country.
two new lakes being built in Texas. One of them is called Bodark. It's like the tree, BOISDARC, Bodark. And the other one is Ralph Hall, HALL. And they're both in northeast Texas near, I guess Bonham is probably the nearest town. Bodark is, I think, almost full. I don't know when it's supposed to open. Ralph Hall is apparently still filling. It's it's a ways. I think both of them are a little ways from being, open to the public. But Texas Parks and Wildlife has been, I know they've been stocking some of the ponds, and that'll be covered up when the lake fills, and putting in habitat and stuff like that, so that when the lake fills up, getting boat ramps built and all that kind of stuff. But those are both being built as water supplies for the municipalities in the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Oh yeah, here it is. There's like a whole website, boatarklake.org. Here, I'll show it. It's very interesting if you want to know like kind of how this stuff starts.
And the reason that there haven't been any significantly big numbers of new reservoirs built in the last 20 years is it costs billions of dollars. It ain't cheap to build a lake like that, of any size anyway. Now, you might build a 1,000-acre one, but you talk about building a 15 or 20,000 acre reservoir, you're talking about huge amounts of money. And
a 20-year process on this lake. By the time that they started it with permits till the time that water delivery was scheduled to begin, 20 years, 2003 to 2023. This is cool. Like on this boat arc, it has every little deal along it. Like 2003, planning and permitting. Then June 2015, water use permit. 18, Army Corps of Engineers permit. November 18, August 18, environmental mitigation work begins.
There's a big key right there. Part of the reason that when the reservoir building boom back in the 60s and 70s, there was not near as much environmental permitting. And land was a lot cheaper. Now, you want to build a big lake like that, you got to jump through a lot of environmental hoops, and the price of land is skyrocketed, so that just the cost of acquiring the places that are going to get flooded are just astronomical. And so, but the reason they can do that is because the water is so valuable to be able to sell it to the consumers, in this case, in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So it does boil down to who's got the biggest checkbook when you're talking about building reservoirs and stuff like that. And then once the lake fills up, then the state Fish and Wildlife Agency gets, if it's going to be a public reservoir, then they get the opportunity to try to manage that fishery and try to make the fishing the best they can based on how that lake's going to operate. Whether, I'll give you, here's another example. When I was in college at Texas A&M was when Lake Fork was being built. And they did a tremendous amount of pre-impoundment work. They cleared places. They left a lot of trees. They poisoned out all of the ponds that were in the basin so that they knew there wasn't going to be any trash fish or anything in there that would grow up. They stocked a bunch of fish in those ponds. They did a lot of work ahead of time. So the lake fills up. Everything's great. Ray Roberts was going to be the next Lake Fork. They built Ray Roberts, did a lot of the same things, cleared some of it, left a lot of trees, stocked the ponds. The problem with Lake Fork, and it was kind of predicted that it was going to be this way. Lake Fork is upstream from Louisville, Lake Louisville in Dallas. Louisville is Dallas's main water supply. So the priority for Ray Roberts is to deliver water downstream to Lake Louisville. So Ray Roberts goes up and down and up and down. The hydrilla, whatever kind of vegetation that tried to get established in Ray Roberts, it had a hard time. The water never stayed as clear. The lake just never developed the way, obviously from the fishing standpoint, we had hoped it would. But the Corps of Engineers kind of predicted, hey, it's going to fluctuate. It's going to be different, And so you may have these great intentions up front, but sometimes those other priorities, in this case, water supply, is the trump card. And it's still a good lake. Obviously,
yeah,
we're having the Bassmaster Classic there in 2025.
Yeah.
But it never turned into that world-class fishery that Lake Fork has become, that they had hoped to see out of that lake.
We're talking with Bass Fishing Hall of Fame member Gene Gilliland, also conservation director for Bass. I think I got out of there fairly unscathed. I only said one dumb thing. It was pretty dumb, though. Looking back on it, I wish I could take back the circle comment.
Yeah.
But we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about Bass Fishing Hall of Fame scholarships, Bass Fishing Hall of Fame grants, and AFCO and bass conservation grants. And then we'll dive into the tech committee because I got some questions about that. You're a member of the Bassmaster Tech Committee. I don't know how much you can say about that or not, but I'll ask all the questions and then it'll be up to you on what to say because I don't have to answer to it. I just ask the question. So it's BTL on a Tuesday. Gene Gilliland in studio. Will be back right after this.
The new Puma STS has been redesigned from the ground up. With the angler, design, function, and performance in mind, nothing on this new offering was compromised, and the only thing carried over from the previous version is the name. Based on the Soft Touch series hull that started with the flagship Jaguar, this new model is nimble and performs incredibly well at all speeds with either a 250 or 300 horsepower engine. Featuring a new 96-inch wide-body footprint, this hull measures out at 20 foot 7 inches in length. Industry-leading design coupled with tournament-winning performance. The Puma STS from Basscat. Feel the rush.
Get the best patterns backed by tournament data. Start by finding the best 10% of your lake. Know exactly what to look for and what to throw. After that, just put them in the boat. Try the Deep Dive app today.
Look at that beast right there.
My Pro Guide batteries keep me going on those long tournament days and long practice days. Always plenty of juice, never fail. The best part about Pro Guide batteries, it's the people behind the company. They have over 40 years experience in the battery business, keeping all of us fishermen out on the water longer, catching more fish. Check them out at ProGuideBatteries.com.
I'm the kind of guy that never leaves the house without a pocket knife, and Gamakatsu's come out with the EDC series of knives. EDC stands for Everyday Carry, so whether you're on the water or off, you can always have it with you. The best thing about it to me is that assisted open feature. With this D2 blade, you've got it right here at your fingertips, so if you can't find your scissors, you need to cut a knot, you need to cut your braid, you've always got it. Make sure you check it out. Never leave home without your Gamakatsu EDC knife.
Born in Japan, using technology, innovation, and precision, Sunline produces the widest selection of fishing lines at the most technologically advanced line factory in the world. Manufactured at the strictest tolerances to produce victories at the highest levels of tournament bass fishing. From household names like Christie, Swindle, and Cruz, to young guns like Cook, Logan, New, and Welcher, they all trust Sunline to take them to the top of the leaderboard. Choose the line that will give you the strength to guarantee your confidence. Sunline.
All right, welcome back. BTL on a Tuesday, talking with Gene Gilliland. Let's talk an opportunity, multiple opportunities, 3 different opportunities, actually, to maybe put a little bit into practice some of the stuff that you've been preaching, and then also some scholarship and some grant money. Let's start with the 2024 AFCO, big supporter of BTL since they got into the freshwater market, and bass conservation grants. This is like not the first year that AFCO's partnered with this. I know that they do the 10% pledge, that both Bill and Casey kind of put their money where their mouth is when it comes to supporting conservation in both fresh and saltwater. We've had the AFCO live release boats. They've done the AFCO bank bags, where they've partnered with Bass Nation teams to do cleanups. They are a massive proponent of conservation and taking care of fisheries. So talk a little bit about the AFCO and bass conservation grants. I'll pull the page up right here.
AFCO is one of the very few companies in the fishing industry that has conservation, as I call it, is part of their DNA. It is a very, very important part of who they are. And I was on some committees with the American Sport Fishing Association with Bill Shedd, who was the president of AFCO. I guess he's the CEO now, or I'm not sure what his title is. Casey's now the president. But Bill came to me when they started to jump into the freshwater market and wanted to get involved with B.A.S.S. on some conservation grant programs. They had already built a live release boat. They had some publications out, but they wanted to do something to help the Bass Nation chapters around the country with some funding to do conservation projects. So we developed this grant program, and we're going on maybe 8 years now that we've done this. Several, I don't remember exactly when we started, but part of that 10% pledge that AFCO has of putting money back into conservation. In this case, the grants are open to any Bass Nation affiliated state chapter or Bass Club that's part of their state Bass Nation. And they can be for habitat enhancement projects. They can be for fish care equipment. They can be for access improvements, invasive species control. There's a whole list of things that they can utilize that money for. The grants are up to $5,000
Oh, wow.
per grant. And it's a fairly simple application. The application form is online, and it's a kind of a fill in the blank thing. You send in a proposal. We collect all the proposals at the end of the open period, and we look over them and try to determine which ones we think are the most worthy. And we'll typically give out about 5 or 6 grants every year. Folks from AFCO and I review all the proposals. We've funded a lot of habitat enhancement projects, whether it's aquatic vegetation planting or putting out, plastic fish attractors.
Mm-hmm.
We've helped groups build live release boats and live release trailers. Just a whole world of things that the money can be used for. And, it puts money in the hands of a lot of these smaller organizations that may not have a lot of funding sources. And it's really been a great partnership with AFCO for all these several years now.
Yeah, since 2018, over $120,000 in grants. Last year, there were 5 grants, all the way from lake improvement, release trailers, planting of cypress trees, Kentucky Barkley, live release boat up in New York, stocking program on the Upper Bay in Maryland. So I'll put the link in the description of the show after this. If you're a Bass Nation member, you have a project, very worthwhile, and you can actually see the tangible results of it, which is cool. I see the press releases and stuff that I'm assuming you write those, that goes out where you see, hey, here's the fish habitat, here's the live release boat that we're changing. So that's open to any Bass Nation club
or state chapter.
Yeah.
And a lot of the ones that we've had, I'll mention this, Matt, the high school fishing teams are eligible too. And a lot of times, sometimes it's easier to get a whole bunch of kids out there to do the work than it is some of the adults club members. But the youth directors, a lot of times, will mobilize their kids to get them out on these projects.
All right, let's move over to the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame. We had Mark Zona on, I think it was last week or a couple weeks ago, after it was announced that he was one of the 5 that'll be part of the 2024 class, along with, he was pretty pumped that Fred Arbogast was in. He's like, Dad's a cool dude. And also McGinnis Reese and Alfred Williams, legendary angler there, one of the first kind of hollow-bodied frog fishermen in there. But one of the big focuses of the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame are scholarships and grants. And there's a lot that have been taken advantage of there, but there's also a lot of meat on the table there specifically for younger people that are looking to get into it. Talk a little bit about the scholarships first. I know this is something that is near and dear to your heart.
Let me go back. Let me talk about the grants first.
Okay,
because
grants first then.
Because the grant program is, the application form is exactly the same as the one for the Bass Nation. We basically just changed the name on the top of the web page.
Okay.
So we've had a number of Bass Nation clubs that have applied for both and gotten both. So some of them have gotten $10,000 for their projects. Now, the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame conservation grants, we have $40,000 in the pot this year to give out to any organization that is doing work that will benefit bass fishing. That's bass clubs. It can be lake associations. It can be state agencies. We gave a grant last year to the Michigan DNR for a smallmouth bass tracking study. So it's not limited to Bass Nation. It is any organization. 2 years ago, we had, I think, 4 bass clubs that are affiliated with TBF, the Bass Federation, that won grants. So it's broad spectrum. It's the same kind of things, whether it's fish care or habitat or any of those categories. $5,000 a pop, and we've got $40,000 to give away this year. So
wow.
And if that happened to be a Bass Nation chapter as well, they can apply for both.
Okay. And
basically just cut and paste their application information from one grant process to the other.
And now, I showed it on the screen there. It's due March 31st.
March 31st for both of them. That's a key. we're coming up to the end of the month. It is a competitive thing, and I suspect we'll probably have 25 or 30 applicants, and have to try to weed through that and come up with 8 or 10 really good projects. And if people don't get it one year, they can apply the next year.
Okay.
So it's a really great way to get some money in the hands of people doing some good stuff for conservation. So the scholarship at the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame is something that we started just a couple of years ago that really spun off of a scholarship program that Shimano had started with B.A.S.S. several years ago. And the idea was to encourage students who want to become practicing biologists, to help them with some funding in for their college. A lot of the state agencies these days are having a hard time finding qualified students coming out of college that know the biology, but are also anglers.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big key, is you got kids coming out of school that know the science, but they're not fishermen, and they don't understand the mentality of the angler or who are going to be their customers, if you want to look at it that way. So this scholarship is to encourage and reward those students who are both anglers and want to become practicing fish biologists, whether it's at a state or a federal agency or something like that. We're pretty specific on that. If they want to become a college professor, we don't consider them. If they want to go off into some sort of laboratory research, we don't consider them. We're looking at people that are fishermen that want to become the next generation of fish managers that are managing our bass fisheries across the country. And we have $25,000 in that pot to give away.
Okay.
And the application deadline for that, I believe, is April 15th.
Correct.
So we'll be awarding those grants sometime this summer. And last year we got about 30 applicants for that too.
Bassfishinghof.com. It's literally the first thing that pops up under the Fishery Management Scholarship Program.
And
Bass Fishing, HOF.com/scholarship.
And historically, that scholarship program, there are quite a few of the people that have gotten that scholarship that are now, in fact, biologists working for state agencies.
Oh, that's cool.
So it's doing what we want it to do.
Yeah. Anything else? Scholarship, grant, stuff related that's just you got to get off your chest here, Gene, before we move on to the spicy section of BTO?
We get into the controversy, I will make a note that next week at the Bassmaster Classic, next weekend, weekend after next, I guess, actually, we're hosting our Bass Conservation Summit, which we do this every 2 years at the Classic. We bring the Bass Nation state conservation directors from, as many of them will come. This year we've got about 30 of them. And we invite the state fisheries chief from all the state fish and wildlife agencies. Now, some of the chiefs come. Sometimes they will send like their bass biologist in their place. This year we're going to have almost 100 people.
Wow. Congratulations. That's good, right?
It's great. It's killing my budget because we put them up in a hotel and we feed them, and all they got to do basically is get there.
Yeah.
But it's a great opportunity for the fishing organizations, the state chapters, to learn from the biologists and vice versa, for the biologists to learn from the state Bass Nation conservation guys. And we talk about our agenda this year's got all kinds of cool stuff on it for talking about bass management. And you know, we've got lots of time for discussions about controversial issues. It's not a public thing. This is, you know, an invitation deal, but it's something that we've done now for many years. And it's really helped create some good relationships between the Bass Nation guys and their state fish and wildlife people.
A foot in the door is huge when you have someone to call just to know what's going on, to find out about a meeting that you might want to attend about your fishery, to have a line of communication.
Right. One thing I always tell my conservation directors around the country is they need to know, they need to be on a first name basis with their state fish chief, so that when they call that fish chief, he picks up the phone and they can talk. And this summit that we do every 2 years really helps build those kind of relationships.
Real quick on the scholarships, Nick wants to know, is that U.S. only, or can Canadians apply?
Canadians can apply for the scholarships. Yes, we awarded one to a young lady in New Brunswick, I think, last.
And you pay them in loonies and toonies.
Pardon me?
You pay them in loonies and toonies?
Yeah, whatever. That's Barbara Bowman's challenge, is how she's going to write the check.
I hear you. All right. So over 100, will there be like anything that comes out of that, or that's kind of all just a behind the scenes thing?
The summit?
Yeah.
Eventually, we're working right now on trying to get all of the presentations recorded.
Okay.
And we will post them on bassmaster.com at some point after the meeting.
There you go. All right. I did not know this. I knew that there was a committee. I didn't know what it was called. It is, we're switching gears here to tournament fishing. We're 56 minutes in. You guys wanted it. You got it. We're going to talk about it. I'm interested in it now. You are on is it called the Bassmaster Tech Committee?
Mm-hmm.
Explain what it is and why it exists, and any other pertinent information about this tech committee.
Okay. Following the last couple of elite tournaments last year, I mean, who's not aware of the issues that blew up in bass fishing related to forward facing sonar? Our tournament managers, our administration at Bass, got a lot of feedback from anglers, from the public, about where this is all going. And there was a clamor to to ban forward-facing sonar. There was a lot of pros and cons. And Chase Anderson, our CEO, said, we need to look into this and not make a quick decision until we have sufficient information to really know how this affects all the players.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than jump right out for 2024 and say, here's what we're going to do in terms of banning or regulating or restricting or whatever, or not doing anything, Chase said, let's form a committee and we're going to spend the year looking into all of aspects of how technology is impacting the sport,
Mm-hmm.
not just forward-facing sonar. So we're that's why it's called the Tech Committee, is we're trying to broaden that out a little bit and look at technology on a little broader scale. Obviously, forward-facing sonar is, or anymore, I think we're going to have to start calling it live sonar, because some of the transducers point backwards or to the side rather than forwards. But anyway, we're going to look at more than just the sonar issues. There's other things, the crappie brakes, we saw some of those pop up at Lake Fork.
The power brakes,
excuse me. I've
got them on my boat right out there if you want to take a gander at them after.
Yeah. Oh,
I'm pretty passionate about that topic. I've talked to several tournament directors at length about it.
Yeah. So anyway, that was the genesis of the Tech Committee. And there are people on the committee at B.A.S.S that are, we've got people from the tournament staff. We've got people from the media side. We've got folks from the video production side. I represent the conservation side of the question. My role on the committee is to interact with the state fish and wildlife agencies to see where they are falling on this issue and what they're going to be doing and how that might impact fishery management and the health and longevity of our fisheries, and then take that information back to the Tech Committee as one of the pieces of the puzzle that the committee will be looking to try to fit together to see if there's something that needs to be done one way or another.
Okay.
So again, there's all these different aspects that we're having to look at. It's not just the product that B.A.S.S puts out on live, whether when we're live streaming or on FS1. It's not just the conservation aspects, although that's certainly going to be a big component of it. We've got people on the committee that represent the anglers, interface with the angler and talking to the anglers, mm-hmm. and obviously our tournament directors interact with the anglers at the open and elite levels. So it's a lot of different moving parts right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we've done so far, for the most part, we've had a number of different calls. Anytime something comes up where one of us finds some information, we share it with the committee. At the pre-tournament meeting at Toledo Bend before the first elite tournament, we did a survey where we physically, each one of the boats as they came through the line, because that's the meeting where the anglers go through and they check their wraps and they take pictures of their boats, and it's kind of that pre-tournament check. As they came through the line, we counted the number and got the models of the various sonar units they have on their boats, how many transducers, what kind they were, where they were mounted, how many batteries they had, what kind of batteries. We actually measured how high the sonar units came up off the front deck from a visibility standpoint. We did the same kind of measurement back at the driver's seat, from the driver's seat to the top of the units on the console to see how high they were. Because there's been some concerns about visibility, and is that a safety issue with more and more people stacking more and more units in front of them? Is that becoming a potential safety problem? So we did that whole survey of all the anglers, and now what we're doing is, after each Elite Series event, we've got people that are interviewing the top 10 anglers and asking them a series of questions about how the technology impacted their fishing for that tournament, percentage of use, that sort of thing. So that's where we are right now.
I'm going to leave it at that because I want to have an objective discussion about this. I just wanted people to know what Bass is doing as far as monitoring it and what's on the radar. I have absolutely zero desire to go down the subjective route on this. You don't have to search very far on the internet to find a lot of opinions on it, but from an objective viewpoint, as a member of the tech committee, that is what Bass is doing right now and in 2024.
And Chase Anderson has been adamant about the idea we are not going to change anything this year. We're the rules that were put in place at the beginning of the season for what equipment was allowed or not allowed will remain the same throughout this season. Sometime later this year, this committee will make recommendations, and ultimately Chase will be the one making a call as to what Bass will do. But probably sometime late this year, Bass will make some sort of announcement to the anglers about what we project the rules are going to be for 2025, to give them plenty of time to get their boats and their equipment. And, we don't want to spring this
whether
on
they
them.
Want to add 3 more graphs and 3 more transducers, or whether they have to limit what they had in 2024 to be compliant.
Whatever way that goes, we're not going to change it in 24, but give them time prior to the 25 season to adjust whichever way might be necessary, if anything is necessary.
That's a good time to have a
point.
podcast like this year with everything.
So that'll be coming on. Yeah. Whenever, sometime later this year.
There's a lot of people who've said a lot of things about this. It's not an enviable job to be making these decisions, because like you said before you went live, there is a 0% chance of making everybody happy.
Right.
And then, the perception is, Bass is a for-profit organization that runs a lot of technology, a lot of ads for companies that make a lot of this stuff in it. So you've got one whole side, like as far as being objective, without saying, oh, well, the only reason Bass is allowing this is because they're getting paid by X company that makes this and that. And as long as they're paying them, it'll never go away. I'm sure you guys have heard that at Bass, but there's also has to be an element of purity in it, to where you guys are not just looking at a contract for a year in advance. You're looking at the next 50 years of the sport that's relatively new, where we're going to go to the Classic and see the guys who won the first couple Bassmaster Classics that are still walking around. So that's an interesting element that I know a lot of people are convinced nothing will happen as long as electronics companies are sponsoring any organization within Bass, MLF, MPFL, any of those.
Well, I will tell you from our perspective that Chase has said that my role as the conservation side of this thing is to listen to what the state agencies are saying. And if at some point the states say that there is concern that there needs to be some sort of limitations. The first and foremost, that's going to be on the states to enact some sort of rule limitations so that it's fair across all anglers rather than targeting tournament anglers. You want, if the state's going to make a rule about how many fish you can keep or how big they have to be or what equipment you can and can't use, it needs to be fair so that it applies across the board. You don't want to target one specific group. Right now, we haven't heard anything out of anybody that I'm aware of other than the state of Wisconsin floated a question about a week ago. They do a thing every spring where they throw out a whole list of potential their proposals where they just want to kind of get public feedback on them. And one of them was, should forward-facing sonar and 360 technology be banned? And they will have public meetings in April, all in every county in Wisconsin, where people can come and voice their opinions about this whole list of potential proposals that are about fishing and hunting and all sorts of things. That's where people need to show up. We need to get anglers in Wisconsin to show up at those meetings and voice their opinions one way or another about what they think needs to happen.
That's fair.
Again, if you don't, or if only people from one side of the argument show up, you may or may not like the results. Now, in Wisconsin, this doesn't automatically make it a law. There's still a process they have to go through before that opinion can actually become a state fishing regulation. It's a couple of year process. So this is not something that's happening overnight. But right now there are about a half a dozen states that are doing some survey work, looking into how many anglers are using the technology, whether they're catching more, whether they're keeping more. It's still very early in that process, on at least from the conservation side. One of the things that it's on my agenda for the Conservation Summit at the Classic in 2 weeks. We've got a couple of states that are in the process of doing those kind of surveys that are going to be presenting some information on just what they're finding so far. It's far, far from any kind of conclusions.
You can't just do like one thing. You're years and years and years to see the impacts of this stuff. That's what yeah. I mean, that would also explain why Randy just bought a vacation home in the Dells. But anyway, it's like I said, I want to try to keep this as objective as possible. Steve did post this, and this, I would like to rebut this. He said the pros are snagging bass and weighing them off forward-facing sonar. That is illegal. You can weigh in a fish unless there is a state that says it is hooked. You cannot have a fish that is hooked outside the mouth. You can weigh in a fish that is hooked outside of the mouth. That is 100% legal. It is not legal to intentionally hook a fish outside of the mouth in any state or form, whether you can see that fish or not. So snagging a fish off of forward-facing sonar, illegal. We know about it in the Opens. Hank has made a point about it in the Opens. They know about it on the Elite Series. It's been made a point on the Elite Series. You cannot snag a fish off of forward-facing sonar intentionally. Now, you can be fishing for a fish off forward-facing sonar with like a jerk bait, and the fish eats it, and he has a treble hook outside the mouth or something like that. As long as a state agency, that's a legal fish. But intentionally going in and saying, hey, I'm going to bring my lure past this thing that I'm seeing on my forward-facing sonar, and I am going to intentionally snag it. Illegal. Everyone knows it is. If that's happening, then that is breaking the rules. But to say that this is happening on it is total BS. Show me the proof where that's happening. At least that's with Bass. I don't know what it is over on the MLF side, but I've heard a couple of people say it. I haven't said anything about it on the show, but 110%, this has been dealt with. This is not a legal activity, and I don't think that it's happening.
Right. I fully agree with you. It's the way our rule is written, it goes to intent. We're not intentionally trying to snag or foul hook fish. But like you said, there are some states that, depending on how their rules are written, the fish has to be hooked inside the mouth, and those fish have to be released. Now that's up to, the states to enforce those regulations, how they want to interpret and enforce those regulations. But our rule has always gone to intent. Obviously, bed fishing, where you're sight fishing, you're looking at the fish, the fish has to be hooked in the mouth. That's in our rules as well. But there are so many myths, misconceptions, misinformation out there about the whole forward-facing sonar issue that, and social media has really clouded the issues so
freaking
much.
Disaster, Gene.
Because there's just so much that people comment on without really knowing the facts, and it's unfortunate that it has created such a division among anglers that I haven't seen anything like this in, God, I'm old, 50 years. I've never seen anything that I can recall that was this controversial. But I think a lot of that's because social media has just allowed this to blow up, and everybody that's got a keyboard or a cell phone can comment on something without really knowing all the facts. And that's unfortunate that it's gone that direction.
You guys should be like, is that called sequestered, like a jury, when it's like a court TV case where you guys aren't allowed to look at anything that's going on until it's done? You guys should all have to live like on an island for the next 8 months with no cell phones.
Oh gosh.
But listen, you can't, it's hard to do this without, I'm kind of over it now. I just wanted an objective take on what Bass is doing. I don't think it's been out there to where they say, hey, this is what's happening. This is what we're doing. This is what we're taking into account. I think that's a package. And, there's 3 organizations. There's MLF, there's with high NPFL, and there's Bass. What Bass is doing is 100% independent from what MLF is doing, which is 100% independent from what the NPFL is doing. Me personally, I think within 2 years, you're going to see 3 drastic changes, or not changes, but 3 different variations from all 3 organizations, all of which are for-profit organizations, where they're going to maneuver to try to do what they feel is best for their organization, for the future of tournament fishing. It wouldn't surprise me if you have one that's no holes barred, freaking make the thing look like a spaceship, one that's no forward facing sonar, and one that's a reasonable compromise for all parties involved. You guys can deduct on who does what on that, but any way else you want to put a bow on this?
Well, we're not just looking out for Bass, the organization. Part of what our goal, and Chase has said this, is that we want to look at the future of obviously the company, but the sport of tournament fishing and the sport of bass fishing on a broader sense. So there's a lot more moving parts to it than just what happens on the Elite Series or the Opens or what is seen on our live stream or on FS1. So we've got to look long term and big picture with this whole thing, and that's why Chase has said, let's take a year and let's look at it objectively and try to look at all the different aspects of this and not make any decisions and not make any changes until we have a better ground.
Poor Chase. Dude comes into this thing running it in 2018. I mean, he knows about it and everything, but he's got to deal with the split. He freaking gets his way through that, and he's like, all right, we're good to go. Then this stuff comes along. So you start hearing about it. The guy's just needs a couple years of smooth sailing.
Yeah, but he's done a great job. And Chase is very thoughtful. He really thinks through these issues, and he's very open-minded and thinks not just, he doesn't have that tunnel vision. He's thinking about all the different aspects that might play into this. And so I think that's a really good way to look at it.
Yeah. All right. We got through that one fairly unscathed. It's hard not to talk about it just because that's professional bass fishing right now. And I do a show 5 times a week that covers professional bass fishing.
Yeah.
Like, what do you want me to talk about?
Yeah. Yeah. It's certainly the topic of conversation around the weigh-ins and at the pool hall and at the tackle shop and everywhere else. But we'll see. I think the jury's just way too far from out. We just don't have enough information yet on how this is going to all play out.
Okay. What year is it where it's no longer an issue? Here, nowhere, indifferent, where it's, the Alabama rig, there was Alabama rig fatigue. You had guys who were pissed that it wasn't, you couldn't use it. You had guys who thought it was the right thing. That stuff kind of died off, I would say, after literally like 2 years, a year and a half, 2 years. How long before all this dies out and it's just.
I think that's going to be probably the same timeline. I would think that within a couple of years, we'll have most of this kind of stuff figured out from the biological side and from the social side and the economic side. Give us a couple of years. I think it'll all kind of straighten itself out, and hopefully things won't be, the industry won't have torn itself apart by then.
All right, Gene, this was a good show, man. I learned a lot in the first part of the show and in the second half of the show. Everyone says they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to hear it. The comment section just lights up as soon as it starts going. But I mean, that's also why you got guys that are getting tons of views on it, guys who are doing 2-3 videos a day about it. You have it on all ends of the spectrum and all ends in between. It's wild, man.
Yeah. I just want to go fishing.
When are you going to get to go fishing next?
Oh, I wish. We went yesterday. It was a little slow, but I don't think I caught a 5-pounder yesterday, which is really unusual for my little lake. But it was my wife's birthday, and she decided she wanted to go fishing.
Oh, well, happy birthday.
And so she was hoping for a 10-pounder, but it just didn't quite materialize that
Didn't you
way.
say she just broke her PB this year already?
She did about a month and a half ago. She caught a 8.44, and that's her best fish.
You're allowed to say what she caught it on?
She caught it on a white chatterbait.
Did smoke it?
Yeah. In fact, one of the other, it's a little club lake. Yes, it's a private lake. Yes, it's got a bunch of big bass in it, and I'm proud of it. One of the other members pulled up to just say hi, and Pat turned around and said, "Well, you guys go catch a big one." And about the time this thing just
so she had an audience too.
Freight trained her chatterbait, and so she she got it in the boat and got to show it off. So
that's cool.
Yeah, it was good. It's been a good spring. I haven't had a dirty 30 yet, which I'm a little behind schedule there. Normally I'll have a 30-pound bag sometime in early March, but the weather's been just kind of goofy. And then, dadgum, I'm working. I got stuff that I've been on 2 tournaments, 2 elite tournaments, and we got the classic coming up.
Yeah.
And, we get into April, which is really prime season. I got meetings and stuff that I go to in addition to elite tournaments. I got somewhere to go every week in April.
Look at my April. This is the first time in history.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Is that not wild?
Yeah.
It's bizarre.
Well, mine's just the opposite. Mine's completely filled up. And that's eating into my fishing. That's for sure. But we'll sneak out a few days here and there. It's a nice thing about. I took my boat in yesterday, a couple days ago.
You still have like a vintage champion in mint condition, right?
1996 champion with a 200 EFI Mercury on it that I took it in to have some service work done on it, try to get it all tuned up and make sure everything's working good. I spent most of my time now in my John boat. I've got a kind of a tricked out John boat that we take to our little private lake. And, but the big boat, we get out on the bigger lakes, and obviously when we go to, I'll take it to St. Clair. We go up there every spring in May, chasing smallmouth. And then I'll go to Minnesota a couple of times. I'm kind of a smallmouth junkie.
I've done it with you. I fished up there with you.
Yep.
Remember we were trying to figure out how to use that dang fly that Fighter was catching them on, and we were like, I think it's. We're like, yep, that's how you do it. Yeah. Like literally, we both had a couple. Neither of us had ever caught one on it because we're in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And we were just I think you just slowly and literally second cast line just starts singing out the other way. That was so much fun.
Yeah. I really enjoy going up there. I've got my buddy Hal Schramm, retired professor, has a cabin in Minnesota, and I'll go up and spend a week or two with him. And we'll go to Mille Lacs and we'll fish the Mississippi River. And there's so many other cool little lakes up there that have smallmouth in them. It's a lot of fun. I really enjoy doing that. And I tell people that I'm kind of on a glide path now. I've been doing this job with Bass now for 10 years, 30 years with the state and now 10 years with Bass. And I'm kind of getting to the point where I want to fish more. And so I'm kind of thinking, how much longer am I going to be doing this?
Bass, however much longer you want. You're in the Hall of Fame, G.
But but it's nice. And Chase gives me the flexibility to, if I'm working on stuff, I'm working on stuff. But the time in between, I can go fishing. And so it's a pretty good gig.
I like it. Let's end it on a positive note. I thought the other one was negative. They're still going at it in the chat, but I'm all about that. I'm actually get to go fishing tomorrow too. Kyle Patrick, who's in the Classic, won the Open last year on Lake of the Ozarks, is flying into Oklahoma City. He's good buddies with Austin Cranford.
Yeah.
And so Kyle's going to be in studio tomorrow for BTL, kind of an announcement on that. And then former Elite Series pro, you know him well, Kevin Ledoux, got the morning off work. So Austin and Kyle and me and Kevin are going to go out to a lake and have a little one-on-one.
There you go.
For some bragging rights and possibly record it.
I got to know Kyle at the NPAA.
Yeah, he did. He
conference.
Went there. Yeah, he was one of the guys who actually took up some of the veterans' suggestions of attending that to make contacts and figure out what's going on in the industry. So bright guy.
He's on the board now for NPAA.
Oh, cool.
So
is Cruz still heavily involved in that?
Some.
Ike.
Yeah.
No, Ike. Yeah.
Member. Yeah. There's several of the elite guys that are part of NPAA, and that organization, kind of on a positive, is a lot of people think of it kind of like a union or something like that. It's really not. It's an advocacy organization. It's a group that I think can really help provide a good voice for anglers, especially guys that are pro anglers or guides, anybody that's in the fishing profession. And it's a really good organization, I think, that can kind of help unify that voice where we need it when it comes to a lot of this political advocacy. So, but yeah, anyway, Kyle was involved in that. And so
good deal. We need to end it before I get fired up again.
Yeah.
Okay. Dude, that was awesome. Like I said, a wealth of knowledge. I've spent time on the water with you in the boat.
We can do it again.
Fishing. Yeah, we do. We need to go fishing again. A lot of time off the water, time fun fishing. Greatly appreciate your knowledge and what you've brought to the sport. Couldn't have been happier that you're actually been, acknowledged for it, and other people appreciate what it is, because there's a lot of thankless work behind the scenes, especially in the conservation. But Bass Fishing Hall of Fame member, you can go to the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame there at Wonders of Wildlife and see see Gene Gilliland right there, right next to the Ray Scotts, the Kevin Van Dams, and all that, and what you've contributed to the sport. So I take it for granted that I came to Oklahoma and got involved in this and have just kind of known you for the past 15 years, especially through Mark. You and Mark go way back. You're part of the original Smith Optics team, BZ, with the yellow jerseys and the rock music and that back in the day. And then I kind of inherited you after that. And like I said, I take for granted your expertise and knowledge, not only what you did for so many years in Oklahoma, but then what you've done over the past, like I said, decade with B.A.S.S as the National Conservation Director. I don't think people realize how many tournaments you're at behind the scenes, working with the live release boat, regulating the water, talking with the guys, how much bass and people in the industry go to you for questions that there's probably less than 10 people in the world that know the answer to, and then how you use your contacts around the country, both politically and within the industry, to better the sport of bass fishing, tournament bass fishing, and Bassmaster. So thank you very much, Mr. Gilliland. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it, Matt. Anytime, I'd be glad to come back, and we need to do a whole Q&A thing sometime.
Oh, that would just get Western. All right, guys, do me a favor, hit the like button on this. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. If you're listening on iTunes, leave a review, 5-star review. Tomorrow, Kyle Patrick in studio. And then on Thursday, Uncle Frank is back, and we have a special guest on Thursday. We have the guys from Great Lakes Finesse that are also going to jump on, along with the schedule for the upcoming Bassmaster Classic. I got to shoot some day 5s. We have a couple day 5s, the new guide day episodes coming up. So those will be returning to bassown.com on every Friday at 8:30 a.m. So that's all we got for today. We'll talk to everybody then. See ya.